I was a great student, top 3 in my class, worked hard in sports. I was like, I'm going to go to Yale. I got waitlisted and then I got rejected with the biggest red hand stuffing ever on the rejection in May. And it was such a weird, funny moment because I had actually just choked away a baseball game and then got rejected from Yale. It was like an all-time low moment.
Oh, no.
Funny all-time low, not a tragic all-time low. And the best thing that ever happened to me, this force of nature, the lone pine, got me off the wait list at Dartmouth. And I jumped into this community and things happen. I'm telling everybody who wants to hear this, things in life happen for a reason. They steer you to places you're supposed to go.
Welcome back to season 13 of The Room podcast. Claudia, can you believe we've been doing this long?
No, it's been 5 years. So many episodes, so many incredible conversations telling the stories of some of the world's most iconic founders and funders. And whether our listeners are new for the first time today or have been with us from season 1, we're so grateful for the community we've built.
Completely. We've had the mission to open the door to the room where it happens for those entire 5 years and have been able to do so over 120 episodes with hard-earned lessons from some of the top technology and consumer founders of our time.
And we've been through a lot personally as well.
We have indeed.
I built, scaled, sold my startup Prive. You were our first investor, so you've been there through the entire journey. And you've also recently graduated from HBS. You're now building at Vercel. And through it all, we've brought the funder and founder perspective.
Yeah, it's really been an incredible journey, and I'm thrilled that I'm back full-time in San Francisco, and we're probably here to stay. That means that there's more for us in terms of growth, both inside and outside of the physical room. But what's important to have really out there is these stories, and we've been able to do so over incredible guests from the CEO and founders of Flexport, Perplexity, Partiful, Zapier, Zillow, Vanta. I could go on. These guests and their enterprises have generated over $100 billion enterprise value and really, frankly, moved the markets.
And growing, especially in 2025. With everything that's going on in AI. So I'm so excited to share season 13 stories that are maybe a little bit more AI focused than past seasons.
Absolutely. And you can find us IRL and URL, especially with our events such as our annual conference Inside Summit or upcoming SF Tech Week events and beyond.
And if you want to get information around those events, subscribe to The Room Podcast and subscribe to our newsletter at theroompodcast.com.
Perkins Coie supports the most innovative entrepreneurs and investors in fast-moving and high-growth sectors, addressing their myriad of legal needs. But the firm doesn't just provide end-to-end legal and business counseling to its startup clients. It also facilitates introductions to key advisors and sources of capital. Perkins Coie's interactive website, Startup Percolator, offers access to programs, resources, and rich dynamic content designed to assist entrepreneurs on their startup journey. To learn more, go to startuppercolator.com and Perkins Coie, COIE.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking platform businesses like the Room podcast use to simplify their finances. It's time banking did more than hold your money. Now it can. With Mercury, you can pay bills in seconds, close the books faster, and even send invoices. Not only does Mercury do away with a patchwork of tools, it eliminates guesswork, giving you complete and accurate visibility into your business's finances, all from one account. Apply in minutes at mercury.com.
This week on The Room podcast, we're opening the door to a unique corner of the founding world, media and entertainment. I sat down with Jack Barrett, the founder behind the wildly popular Instagram page Friday Beers and its parent company, Almost Friday Media. In this special live episode, recorded at the Dartmouth Entrepreneurial Forum in San Francisco this fall, Jack and I dive into how he's turned a viral meme page into a full-fledged media platform with over 10 creators, 20 brands, 30 million followers, and 1.5 billion quarterly impressions. As two proud alumni of that small but mighty college on the hill, we also reflect on Dartmouth's unexpected influence in the entertainment industry with hallmarks such as Mindy Kaling, DeShonda Rhimes, and how our shared roots shape the path we're both building today in media. Jack's story is equal parts hustle, humor, and heart, with a look at what it takes to build alpha in the media age. There's no Claudia this week, but I hope she enjoyed her week off. Let's open the door. Hi, everyone. This is probably a slightly different kind of conversation, hence the beers. But we're going to be talking about the future of new media, why we're pretty stoked about it,
Very stoked.
and sharing our stories. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off by introducing Jack. Many of you probably know Jack. He needs no introduction if you follow his really sick Instagram account. He's the co-founder and CEO of Almost Friday Media, the company behind the brand Friday beers that some of you are now drinking. After graduation, I like how he included cum laude, so we know he's smart,
I am smart.
in creative writing from none other than Dartmouth College. He began his career in investment banking before moving into media development at Radical Media. He later co-founded Illuminarium Experiences, raising over 100 million in funding. In 2021, you left to pursue Friday Beers full-time and creating Almost Friday Media alongside your brothers in a creator-first media network.
That's my life story summed up. We can actually end the conversation there. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled to be at this conference. I'm thrilled to be talking to you, Madison. Madison McElwain is the co-founder and co-host of the Room podcast, which is one of the top 5% technology podcasts in the world. And she's Forbes 30 under 30 in media, right, with your co-host?
Yeah.
For the Room, and it's an incredible platform. She started her career in product development. Then you worked for Defy VC, and then she went to a school nobody's ever heard of, Harvard Business School. Came back here to San Francisco. She works for Vercel, looks after their startup ecosystems, and very importantly, still runs the Room. She's talking to leaders in tech, entrepreneurs, innovators, people who founded Perplexity, people who founded Snowflake, people who founded Brex, and she's been doing it for 12 seasons. I am pumped to be talking to her today.
Thanks so much, Jack. We've talked a lot about the incredible entrepreneurs that come out of Dartmouth. And obviously, there's no shortage of amazing people in Hollywood, but we're really going to focus our energy on this idea of new media. How do you use social media, other platforms to tell incredible stories and build incredible businesses? But before we get there, wanted to kick off with a little bit about where did you grow up and how has that shaped your view of the world?
I am very happily from a town called Greenwich, Connecticut, which is a suburb outside of New York. It is exactly what you think the town is like. I am one of 3 brothers, Barrett brothers. There's a lot of dudes in our family. Myself, my brother Max, who's a little bit less than 2 years younger than me, and my brother Sam, who's 6 years younger than me. And they're my, as we said, co-founders of Friday Beers and Almost Friday. I don't know how else to say this, but I had an amazing childhood growing up. And the only thing that my dad cared about was try hard in school and play sports and be psychotically obsessed with the Yankees, which has plagued me and ruins my life in many ways on. And that's an ongoing thing I shouldn't really be talking about here. But we had an amazing growing up experience of just trying to do well in everything we applied ourselves towards in school. And then after that, we played football, we played basketball, we played baseball, we tried hockey, we tried lacrosse. We had a wiffle ball field in our backyard where we played obsessively every single day during the summer. We played this game called Bonsai Ball, where we basically mix martial arts and manhunt, where you just run around the house trying to kill each other with a dodgeball. And everything we did was just so fun, engaging, and collaborative. I met so many friends through school, so many friends through sports, and those type of friend groups that I established are still my best friends today. One thing that my dad told me when we were growing up, and this is a funny thing because Greenwich is a town where you're either, banker, lawyer, doctor, or failure. And there's really not much wiggle room for anything else in between. My dad was the opposite of that. And he said, listen, I don't care what you do, but if you don't bring home a 1 effort grade, this effort grade system is like 1's the best, 3 you're not trying. If you don't bring a 1 effort grade, I'm going to kill you. And I don't care if you get an F minus, you better be trying hard. And I want you to try to find something in your life that you're happy about. If there's one thing I take from growing up in my family and growing up in Greenwich and just thinking about the world, it was learning to see a bigger picture and explore what really lights your own fire and makes you happy. And I'm grateful to my dad for so many things in life. And that lesson is one that I tell him all the time. It really changed the way I think. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what you came to do and how you started the Room.
It's really cool to hear just how important your family was in your foundation. And then now even to have your brothers still be so critical to business today and that impact. It definitely reminds me a lot of my family. I was born in Atlanta, moved to Seattle when I was 4, which definitely, I think, taught a little bit of resilience because that was different. There was no Chick-fil-A in Seattle. And I grew up around the tech ecosystem where frankly, like tech was discussed at my dinner table. And so I never didn't think about tech as something that I could do or want to do, but it never totally intrigued me. Like I never wanted to be an engineer, a coder. That didn't attract me. But I thought it was really cool what people were starting to do online as builders, as content creators, as storytellers. At the time, it was probably called blogging. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. That's a cool thing. And so I came up to my parents and I said, I have a little bit of money that I can use towards clothes, but what if you gave me more money to use towards clothes and I'll start a blog and that'll make me money. That first blog did not make me any money and you should never look for it, please, on the internet. But that idea that my parents were always willing to like invest and trust in the ideas that I had and using the internet to create things always made me excited to do more about that and always just stay curious in that mindset. So I would say that was the number one thing I learned growing up was staying curious, but using technology to empower that curiosity. And I definitely see that throughput for some of my time at Dartmouth, but more so now in still being a creator today. We use that word now, but I love that you mentioned the brothers. You work with your brothers. I only have brothers. I always wanted a sister. I've turned out to love my brothers a lot. One of them's here with us today. And I noticed when I went to business school that almost every woman at HBS had either only brothers or was an only daughter. There was no other sister. There was maybe no other siblings. And it's like interesting, just like interesting learning experience for me. My brothers, I love them. They totally shaped me too. And I'm just grateful for that.
Brothers matter. They're all I've ever known in my entire life. And I think you're hitting on something key is like what shapes you really stays with you for a long time. And then even when I think about like the next chapter of my journey, talking going to Dartmouth, I'll tell you a funny story right now because it's making fun of me, which is the key in humor. You got to be self-deprecating. My great grandfather went to Yale. My grandfather went to Yale. My dad went to Yale. I was a great student, top 3 in my class, worked hard in sports. I was like, I'm going to go to Yale. I got waitlisted and then I got rejected
Brutal.
with the biggest red hand stuffing ever on the rejection in May. And it was such a weird, funny moment because I had actually just choked away a baseball game and then got rejected from Yale. It was like an all-time low moment.
Oh no.
Funny all-time low, not a tragic all-time low. And the best thing that ever happened to me, this force of nature, the lone pine got me off the wait list at Dartmouth.
Wow.
And I jumped into this community and things happen. I'm telling everybody who wants to hear this, things in life happen for a reason. They steer you to places you're supposed to go. Dartmouth was something that transformed me in a way that I can't even emphasize how important it was. And I think a lot of people in this room probably share that feeling. And the reason it transformed me, and this is what Almost Friday Media became, is when you go to Dartmouth, you just join all these little different communities. And I walked onto the squash team, different story that I talked to my psychiatrist about, but I was really good at squash growing up. My dad was a very intense coach. Then I quit. Then I went to Dartmouth. I was like, I got to play sports. So I walked onto the squash team. I was a columnist at the Dartmouth. I wrote a column called It's Always Snowy in Hanover. It's like a spinoff of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Shout out Jeff, president of AD, by the way, respect. I was a very proud member and of the proudfully and not shamefully de-recognized, but somewhat re-recognized Alpha Delta. But we gave notes every Wednesday, and I was someone who loved PowerPoint presentations and dance contests. And I acted out the scene from American Psycho where he's confessing to the murders in a very funny way for the fellas to be entertained. And why I'm saying that is because every one of those things, you're building new culture. You're building the stuff that you joke about with your friends. That is the same for so many people in America and around the world. They have these similar experiences. And what Almost Friday Media became was a comedy and getting through life network, and I'll talk about this in a bit, that celebrated all those moments. So like what Dartmouth gave me was the culture of comedy that we make stuff on. It really catapulted me into my journey in a couple of different ways after that, but that was a huge driver.
It does seem like you had a really strong sense of self at Dartmouth, or at least you were finding the pockets of the community that allowed you to become who you were going to be. But then you did fall into the trap of becoming an investment banker.
I know, I was gonna say that as well. Also, ironically, despite my dad being the most positive and helpful and nurturing influence in my life, I still did go into finance. I was looking at everybody who was on the squash team. It was the cool guys in Alpha Delta, not the lame guys, the cool guys. And they were all getting jobs at investment banks. And I was like, I got to do this. This sounds like what every cool kid does. And Dartmouth, everybody knows, is a type of place. If you get into Dartmouth, you have a serviceable GPA and you have a pulse. They plop you out and they put you in investment banking. And I was one of the most mediocre bottom bucket analysts in the history of Deutsche Bank leveraged finance. And as soon as I started, I was like, I got to get the hell out of this place. So after they do a year and then they kind of get a job in private equity or at an asset manager or something, I was like, I'm going to stay on and I got to figure out how to get into storytelling, entertainment, media. I was a creative writing major at Dartmouth. Like that was what excited me. I have to escape and find something else. And my uncle was a creative director. He is still a creative director. He's like, I have people for you to talk to. And this one guy I'd met with, name is John Kamen. He ran a production company called Radical Media. He had a talk with me and he gave me this presentation. And I had never seen a presentation other than like this is the $800 million term loan B that Warburg Pincus is going to buy Santander Asset Management with. Like, that's what I thought a presentation was. He took me into this world of the Beatles, the band, and Radical Media putting on a live experience that had visuals and movies and music and pictures of George Harrison. And I didn't have any money, but I left that room ready to give John Kamen everything that I had. And that taught me that when you're running a media business, the most important thing is connecting story with people who want to hear a story. And it can be told in a lot of different ways. So as I get into talking about how we set up Almost Friday Media, I just wanted to set that point up. That underlying current of storytelling drives the media business is what I picked up from John. And I'll get into a little bit later, but that's where my journey began from there. Likewise, when you were starting out, how do you go from where you were into starting The Room in 2020?
Well, it's funny because I did not get an investment banking job at Dartmouth, although I did try. And I remember my JP Morgan Super Day like it was yesterday. They asked me what a DCF was. I totally choked, cried, not getting that internship. And obviously, that was also the best thing that ever happened to me because I would have been a terrible investment banker. And I ended up doing a tech job out of college, and product's a cool thing to do in the Bay. So came and I realized I had more street capital than I knew I did being a PM. And people introduced me to people, and I met my best friend, co-host, and business partner of 5 years, my first fall out here, who was also starting a product. And just like Dartmouth, people have been a continuous thread throughout my whole career. And when we started The Room, it was 2 years into our career. I had just been transitioning to venture, and Claudia was starting her company. I started my venture job 6 weeks before COVID hit. And everyone tells you the way you meet people in venture to invest in is to go to happy hours and go to events like this in person. And so I had a big personal oh shit moment of, I don't know how I'm going to do this job in a pandemic. What's a girl to do? And there'd been this evolution of the venture capital industry, honestly, since Andreessen's time, but even Bill Gurley, when he was starting Benchmark, he used to do this thing where he would actually send faxes to people that would have these updated deal sheets of really cool deals that you might have missed this week. Kind of the original blog, the original newsletter. I think A16Z's magic was that they then saw the rise of media online, saw the stories you could tell about founders, about a brand, and that's the machine that I think A16Z is today. So in 2020, that was really well and running. And actually, it hurt you as a VC if you didn't have a platform. It hurt you as an individual investor just getting started in your career if you couldn't tell your story. And I looked at Twitter and I said, well, I'm not a tweeter. I'm not that funny. And I like long form. I like storytelling. I was a history major at Dartmouth. And 3 people in my life in 1 week said, have you thought about podcasting in the summer of 2020? And the third was my co-host. And that just felt like a why now for me on the personal front. And a why now for the community was, gosh, there's a lot of stories that deserve to be told in tech. And a lot of them are being told by the NPRs of the world. But what if we told them through the lens of 2 young women asking questions that were legitimately needed? Like, we needed the answers. Claudia wanted to figure out how to get to product market fit. I wanted to figure out how to have anyone take my capital, which was becoming a commodity. That was really the inception of The Room. It was part personal, and it was part also, let's open the door.
Right.
Let's tell these stories that we know other 24-year-olds are legitimately asking, and they're too afraid to ask maybe. And a lot of people took a bet on us. They said, hey, we'll tell you our story. You guys have nothing. You have no followers. You have no reach, but I'd love to be helpful. So it was really an act of charity at the beginning. And now looking back 5 years, I'm just so grateful for that, and have really been able to see the way that in my career, having a platform, having a voice has made me a better investor and ultimately helps build a platform that's bigger than me.
What you just said about a 24-year-old wanting to tell a story and not really having the courage to or being able to is why Almost Friday exists. And fast forward, I was at Radical. I was working with Max as the Barrett brothers, your comedy writing team, on the side of my job doing creative development. What we wrote about is like, this is what we do as 27-year-olds. This is 20-something comedy. We actually had an Instagram account called 20-something comedy, 4,000 followers. If you're following, you're
You're an OG.
yeah. And we would send pilots every month out to like agents, managers, producers. And everyone's like, what have you done yet? And we're like, we haven't done anything. We're trying to do this. This is how we think you're supposed to make media in 2020. Or 2019 was when we really started to hit it. And what happened was Max and I said, maybe we should put this idea on Instagram. We made this really new type of commodity, which is like a video with sports clips, TV clips, movie clips, all edited together with a cool song underneath with text on top of it. And it's going to be called Friday Beers, which is a word or a term that means so many different beautiful things. It means we made it through another week. We're celebrating on Saturday. I don't want to go to work on Monday. I don't know if I should be doing this accounting job. Why isn't the girl that I went on a date with responding to my texts? The ups and downs of growing up in these two beautiful words. And the first moment I knew that it could be something was we put a video out. I don't know, people have probably seen Austin Powers, the original, the first one. There's a scene where he's like in London in the beginning and he's trying to hide because he's famous Austin Powers, but people recognize him. It becomes this huge ordeal in the streets. And he's running away from this like gaggle of people around a building. And he comes back out and there's a Friday Beers text over him and there's a band playing in the back and it was the Fellas. And that moment grew the account from 0 to 10,000 followers.
Oh my gosh.
During the first week. And during the second week, I was sitting on a train with my friend Ulz coming back to New York from Greenwich where I live. And it was going from 10,000 to 15,000 to 25,000 in like 15 minutes, just skyrocketing, growing. And I was like, Ulz, this thing kind of has the legs to be something because this is a content channel that is actually putting our voice out in a way that really couldn't have been done before. And there's this girl who was sitting 2 rows away from us and she popped her head out and says, are you guys talking about Friday Beers? Random girl. And she's like, my boyfriend deleted Instagram and he just re-downloaded it yesterday to start sharing these videos with his friends. I was like, Ulz, I think we have something cooking with gas here. And that was the moment. And there's one thing I want to say about Friday Beers quickly now is for people who are not familiar with it, it is a coming of age comedy network for 21 to 35-year-olds. And we write about people's friends. We write about who you grow up with, who you get through life with, who you're spending the rest of your times with, the good moments and the bad moments, the people who are in your group. We wrote a whole Bible of here are the characters or who are in your friend group. Here are the moments you feel. Everybody's invited to this party. Everybody's included. There's no punching down. And we're going to ride this thing together. And that was a note in comedy that did not exist. Literally since The Hangover, there hadn't been a good comedy movie that was taking that spirit, that was like back to the days of National Lampoon and bringing it to many people as possible via the channels where they were on. And that is the reason that Friday Beers and Almost Friday, and I can get into that in a second, became this sort of cultural marker because it was bringing back comedy that we all love to the people who really needed it in a way that had been disrupted or disfigured or discredited by the media entities for a long time. And that's what we're doing. On that note to you, how has the Room facilitated this flywheel for being an investment platform, a startup connector, connecting with entrepreneurs? Like, how does that growth work?
No, and I love how like it started as a side hustle for you, and now you've gotten that moment where 3 years ago you said we're going to do this for real, and mine's still a side hustle. I think it's always served a broader goal in some of my other core functions and core careers. I would say both personally, it's had incredible reach, and then also professionally being able to have an impact on others. And I love how much of your mission and the way that you think about Friday Beers is making people feel seen, making people feel known, bringing down the intimidation factor in some of these spaces, whether it be comedy or whether it be in technology. I have definitely been nervous to walk into many a room, and now having this benchmark of 130 CEOs and Fortune 500 founders that I can say I've talked to, it just helps me bring down my cortisol levels in like any important business meeting I'm ever in. I know I've talked to some people and I've messed up and it was totally fine. And so it's just given me this strength and inner confidence that I pretended I had before, but I do feel like I have it a lot more grounded. And then tactically, it's created a network effect, to use the simplest term, of founders who then view you with more authority and really start to trust that you're actually going to add value to their cap table. You're actually going to introduce them to people that make a difference. I just had a friend ask me to connect him for an angel check for one of our former founders, who's actually a Dartmouth founder, which is super cool, the Clockwise guy. And for my co-host, she got an investor out of our podcast that we interviewed. She got customers. And now we're trying to really distribute that as a community platform to make sure that other people can benefit from that ecosystem play. And we host an annual conference now. We host SF Tech Week events. And similar to your point about where big corporations are missing the mark and needing the next generation of under 35 founders, builders, thinkers, creators, is when COVID was coming out and people were not returning to work, people were starved for events. They were starved for community. And you can call it a third space, whatever you want to call it. I think people meet first online. You meet first through URL, and then you build trust with the brand, you build trust with the community, and you go, okay, I guess I'll meet you in person. It's totally flipped the paradigm. That's helped me invest better, invest smarter, and really, hopefully, with this motion of giving back and building community.
You're talking about paradigm shifting, and I'll explain this. I think it's like a generational thing. We exist because traditional media is transforming faster than you could ever think. And I'll just explain what Almost Friday Media makes. We run 15 different Instagram, TikTok, Twitter accounts, 7 podcasts, 15 YouTube channels, email newsletters. We have tremendous live event lifestyle brand. We run a bar in Nashville. We distribute a beer. We are a huge force in young people territory. If you go to a college campus and you ask somebody, what is Friday beers or what is Almost Friday, they're going to know what you're talking about. That center of attention is driven by how incredible technology has made distributing entertainment and making entertainment. If you have a phone, or you have an iPad, or if you have a computer, you consume content that Almost Friday Media makes. It is every platform. You're seeing now shifts in traditional media. Versant is spinning out of NBC because the cable viewership numbers are non-existent, and they're trying to spin off all their digital channels to become something big. HBO and Discovery are splitting, and they're taking all of the cable assets and they're trying to spin off the streaming assets to reach more audience. The people who work for Almost Friday Media, the creators, especially William, Chet, Billy, Elise, Rusty, Willie D, they have just made a show based off of our YouTube channel, Almost Friday TV. It's probably the best sketch comedy on YouTube. 6 streamers bought the show. So it's a circular notion. They are trying to buy audience where we have created audience because that is where the audience is consuming comedy right now. And it's going to be bought or made by most likely FX. And then the other contenders are HBO, which is a really big one. And then also Apple. They want where audience is, and we create where audience is. And I could say this about Paige Hyman, who runs our podcast, or Mama Leah, who runs social, my brother Sam Barrett, who runs all of Friday Beers, Almost Friday Networks. They are experts in their verticals, and they are making content for where the audience is. And it's creating this amazing circular effect where we are becoming the movers of digital content, which is soon just going to be, we are becoming the movers of content, because that is where eyeballs are, and that is where the eyeballs that care about what we put out are going to be. And we're going to continue making content where those eyeballs are.
And I love how your story started on Instagram in 2019, which is up to 3 million followers, by the way, right now. I checked this morning, and you saw this digital first, video first moment really starting to kick off, and Reels is just getting added, and you have the TikTok moment that just exploded in COVID. And I'll just add on the podcasting side, which I know you guys have your toes wet in too, is when I started 5 years ago, Apple was the #1 place that people stream podcasts. And actually today, YouTube is, and Spotify is second, and Apple's third. So like, even in the 5 years, that 6 years you and I have been building, these platforms have changed.
So many times. And honestly, Instagram has changed probably 7 times. You always hear, oh, the algorithm has switched. That's a real thing. They changed the algorithm to deliver videos differently than they used to be delivered. And we make Friday Beers videos differently because we can see now when people drop off a video, when people like a video, when people engage and share with the video. It's all advancing at a scope that is really rapid. And to make content that matters, you have to be on top of every single one of those tech platforms. You have to be aware of how everything's changing, and you have to be changing your content to make it grow at the pace that it used to grow.
And I love that you guys are creating like really like a media syndication. And I think for a long time, we saw this unbundling of syndications and really like the creator first motion. And then you have what you're having now with Almost Friday Media. You have Unwell Media with Alex Cooper. You obviously have the New Heights guys getting bought out by Wondery and all of that. We're an indie podcast. We were one of 2 indie podcasts on the media list for Forbes our year. There was 30 other creators. They were all like syndicated with CNN, syndicated with NPR. And actually, it's a question we're asking is, should we be under a podcast network? Should we be under a bigger platform? Because now the trad media people are recognizing you guys. And it's so cool to see that that's become a place where you can continue to find growth. And so I want to just close this out with a question around what's next for you guys? How can the Dartmouth community support and be helpful?
Steve Mandel said something that was pretty cool last night, and it was a very modest way of saying entrepreneurship is about pouncing on how trends change. He was really modest about it. He's like, I got very lucky in a lot of elements for life. But what he's saying is like a real entrepreneur pounces on moments where the structures around him are changing. So what I would ask and what I would, encourage people to do is start using the platforms that people are using if you don't already. Discover us on Spotify, discover us on YouTube, discover us on social media, discover all the other creators who are putting stuff there. Even if what we make is not necessarily your niche, there are the future of creators and different content makers across so many verticals using these platforms, and they're being more used than you could ever imagine every single day. So what I ask the community is just watch what we're making and use the platforms that put out what we're making, and any support that you guys offer is well received by us, and we appreciate it so much.
I would say ditto. Every content creator wants more people to like, follow, and subscribe. So right back at it. And also just like a shout out, I think it's fun that we're both humanities majors. We're both enjoying our lives. So that's great.
As the one major I could handle because I can speak English, so I had to just check that box off.
Yeah, that's a win. Jack, thanks so much for doing this with me. This is a total treat. I know we're between you guys and your own Friday beers. So we'll let the amazing closers bring us back up and close us out here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us at The Room Podcast. If you want more from The Room every week, subscribe to our newsletter at theroompodcast.com/newsletter. We'll be back next week with a new episode, an inspirational guest, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. See you in the room. Perkins Coie supports the most innovative entrepreneurs and investors in fast-moving and high-growth sectors, addressing their myriad of legal needs. But the firm doesn't just provide end-to-end legal and business counseling to its startup clients. It also facilitates introductions to key advisors and sources of capital. Perkins Coie's interactive website, Startup Percolator, offers access to programs, resources, and rich dynamic content designed to assist entrepreneurs on their startup journey. To learn more, go to startuppercolator.com and Perkins Coie, COIE.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking platform businesses like The Room Podcast use to simplify their finances. It's time banking did more than hold your money. Now it can. With Mercury, you can pay bills in seconds, close the books faster, and even send invoices. Not only does Mercury do away with a patchwork of tools, it eliminates guesswork, giving you complete and accurate visibility into your business's finances, all from one account. Apply in minutes at mercury.com.